Hello, everyone. This is International Dance Council, of Great Section of the International Dance Council, SID UNESCO. And together with our lovely Miss Lisa Nish Sutvan, we have started the project Dance Africa. This is the second stream that we will have today. And we have many, many speakers for today. And thank you all for participation. Mr. Rahman Jamal, Hip Hop Congress National. Miss Lisa Nish Sutfen, Dance and Fitness Concepts and the Young Dancer Project, Dance Africa. Rosanna Silvestro, Syntropic Agroforestry, Permaculture Design. Carlos Richard Sanko, Uniting Ed Africa and Diaspora. Emil Johnson, author, lecturer, hip hop cultural specialist. And we all are ready for the start. Miss Lisa, the platform is yours.
Thank you very much, Anait. Um, I first want to introduce Mr. Rahman Jamal. He's the president of the Hip Hop Congress National, which is actually in 7 different countries. Um, he's an actor, a martial artist, and a specialist in hip hop culture and breakdance instruction. Ramon, I believe the floor is yours. I can't hear you. Anahita, I can't hear him.
Mr. Amal, please fix your microphone if possible, because we cannot hear you.
I can't hear him.
It's Mr. Amal that has to fix his microphone, Miss Lisa.
I can't hear you. Okay. All right, Rahman, if you could turn your microphone up. We can't hear you.
We could go on with another speaker until Mr. Ramal will fix his microphone problem.
All right, well, I have a 10-minute video that I can go ahead and start with. So let me hit the share screen.
Please.
Hello, hello. Can folks hear me?
Yes,
Okay. I'm not hearing anything on the video.
hold on. This runs for another 10 minutes.
How's my sound now? Okay. Is there supposed to be audio to the video? I'm just hearing a beat in the background.
Ah, well, let's go ahead and move quickly to Rahman Jamal as his time is fairly limited. Go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. Real quick, so the network that I represent is called Hip Hop Congress. It is a network, nonprofit of educators, artists, and activists. We use the overlap of these three fields to reconnect us back to the essence that even hip hop comes from. Uh, I really like that we opened with this video because it shows the precursors to even hip hop in the United States before it was called anything like that or recognized as a global culture. And we'll hear from Emil a little later about the ancestral connection between what happened in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s in the United States and how that is really pulling from these very old traditions in the human experience that go all the way back to our First Nations peoples, our indigenous communities. And one thing that I've noticed and that I've learned in the process of being a not only a hip hop practitioner, but a student of the culture is that when we go back far enough into African tradition, there was no separation between dance, martial arts, cosmology, or spirituality. All of these things were interconnected in the practice. So when you see that circle of people doing what looks like dance moves, that wasn't just a dance exhibition. These were integral parts of the community's way of reaching a higher state of consciousness, really. And what you have with hip hop is essentially the same thing. Those same channels through those same rituals are being understood in a modern context. And so it's really important when we engage in these forums to not lose sight of that, because what happens in Western culture is all of those things get separated out, right? Dance is seen as entertainment, not as a form of self-defense or conflict resolution. And there's no real direct connection to the spirituality that is present when you are in a situation or in an experience of elevating your consciousness through dance. Dancers themselves can experience that personally, but as far as our general understanding of how these forms are used to raise our vibrational frequency and consciousness, those conversations are still just now starting to be touched upon with movements like hip hop education. Hip Hop Congress, the organization I represent, has just now, in the last couple of years, gotten the first hip hop education initiative that is statewide in California, in the United States, in the country. There are a lot of practitioners who are, we were actually a part of one of the first initiatives working with people like Martha Diaz and artists looking at themselves not just as entertainers, but as educators. And now you have many different pockets across the globe of artists who are taking on that role. And this is a great thing because in America, and since the days that hip hop left the inner cities, hip hop has been exploited for entertainment. And anytime that happens, that all of the deeper aspects of it, the reasons why people even create the way that they do, those tend to get taken out of the conversation. We don't get that deep into why these forms are so entertaining to us. We just like to be entertained, and the industry just really just puts that on a production line, and you can tell by the music or the forms of this culture that get put out there, it really has nothing to do with the deeper fabric that these traditions come from. So, and this is an example of that as well. We talk about dance in the Olympics, having these conversations is like, is this going to be connected to the cultural fabric, or is it another form of entertainment? We need education to bridge that gap, and I think that's why we're all here today. Um, I think that's just my general sense of where I'd like to kind of start off this conversation. I do want to make a few distinctions because even in our terminology of understanding something like hip hop dance, a lot of people use the term breakdancing, which is a form of hip hop dance. You could say it's one of the original forms of hip hop dance coming out of New York. But there are the expression of Black creativity in the United States is not just relegated to that one form. I'm from California, so we had a whole other tradition, cultural tradition that developed separate from breakdancing that has since become absorbed by the hip hop industry to the point where if you're not from those communities and you just see these dance forms through the media, for example, you just put the umbrella of, oh, that's hip hop dance. But some of these forms predate hip hop. And on the West Coast, there was an attempt to get that distinction out there through the film industry, but even the film industry couldn't get deep enough into the fabric of the communities that were the creators of these dances enough to really educate us as to why these things are what they are and what makes them different from each other and distinct. We can find a few common circumstances in the United States that had different effects on the communities that created these forms. Most people who are familiar with hip hop scholarship narrative know that there was a federal act, a renewal act that was supposed to basically create freeways through the inner cities for better transportation that ended up running out of money and leaving a lot of these cultural hubs decimated. And the South Bronx is one example of that. And there's lots of material describing the social and cultural effects of that. What's less documented is that this was not just something that happened in New York. This happened on both coasts. And the practice that I represent, that I'm more versed in, is actually the undocumented effects of the same thing happening in San Francisco, particularly the Fillmore community and its connection to Hunters Point and the Black families that came from the South and migrated and had to create their own cultural response to the brand of we say prejudice, discrimination that was different than what was common in the South. You have what's called, you could say, a liberal racism, where it looks nice and smiling and like we all get along in your face, but economically it is just as exploitative or just as leaving people out of the upward mobility process as anything else. And that forces a community to have to play chess a little smarter. And this is the tradition that comes out of or that was informing things like the Black Panthers, who when their influence ended up changing federal laws and state laws and everything, because they applied the intelligence against the system that was trying to suppress its people. So we have a lot of different narratives of history that need to be connected so that even us as educators are using these terms responsibly. We need to know words like boogaloo, robotic, strutting as distinct forms of dance expression that are distinct from things like popping or breaking or crumping or bopping. I mean, there are so many brands of movement, and if we're really going to be responsible to these cultures, we have to do our own research. We have to become informed as educators who want to do the right thing, And Hip Hop Congress is engaged in creating that documentation so that folks who really do care about the distinctions and the history can get that information. So that I'll just end with some resources. The struttersroom.com is for the Bay Area in the history of rotary roboting and strutting, is a great resource on YouTube. There are lots of videos if you go to youtube.com/sfstrutter. These are forms that predate hip hop becoming global. Hip hop, the New York tradition, the inner city tradition of New York and breakdancing existed for 10 years before anybody knew about it outside of the community. Similar to what was happening on the West Coast. These were inner city ghetto expressions that, and I mean ghetto in the sense of like, these are people shut out from society intentionally, came up with their own traditions, their own sacred traditions of survival in those environments. And on the West Coast, those were sacred to the point where they weren't going to share that with the world if it was going to be altered or exploited for mass consumption. And that's one of the reasons why more people don't know about this, in comparison to New York or Los Angeles, who had entertainment industries and the artists who were willing to put themselves out there to get some of this information across. We need to dig deeper than what the entertainment industry has provided us, and that's where education and activism come in. And I can definitely share those links in the chat. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ramon Jamal, for taking the time out of your really busy day right now at this time before you start working on after-school programs, for which you're also to be congratulated, getting you into the schools as a full partner.
Thank you.
We do have information listed in chat for those who wish to gather more or ask questions. And I'll be moving on to our next presenter. She's from Australia, or she's in Australia right now, Rosanna Silvestro. She's the president of Syntropic Agroforestry. Her specialty is permaculture design, and she represents one of the three different permaculture institutions that we've run across in our conversations and work with individuals in both Uganda and Kenya. So moving that forward, the floor is yours, Rosanna.
Hi there, everybody. I hope that rain isn't coming through the mic. Is the sound okay for you? All good. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me along. I'm the director of Origins Permaculture Education and Research Centre, which is registered in Australia. I am aiming to build education centres, primarily in the global south, working with groups and individuals in Africa, starting with Ghana. Well, back in 1996, I started an organisation called PermaGhana, and held a training course it was an introduction to permaculture, and aiming to train trainers. I'm originally from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, but I live in Australia, grew up here. I actually grew up in kind of like a housing project, or housing settlement, I guess. A little bit of a poor part of town called Mount Druitt, and I actually grew up with a lot of Indigenous or First Nations people here, Aboriginal, men and women, children, who were moved out there from the city areas, and there was a strong hip hop and breakdance culture back in the 70s and 80s, I guess, early 80s. It really was quite popular. And I remember being out on the streets, and we had our ghetto blasters and all that stuff, and it was amazing. And back in those days, I guess it was more a pure form that we listened to. I'm not really up on the new music, but anyhow, I see that when I visited New York in 2010, I visited a garden there called Gorilla Gardens, yeah, in New York. And they practice permaculture, and had a really nice little community there. Well, primarily my work is with groups in Africa, of course, and I'm partnered with a group in Kenya at a refugee camp in Kakuma. And we started an organisation last year called Permaculture Development Network for Change. So we're also organising trainers to train each other, to train the wider community, and build permaculture gardens, basically, so that food security and mitigating climate change can be taught in the wider community. So really, I mean, I don't know how much you know about permaculture. I guess it's more mainstream these days. I started back in 1993 with pioneer teacher Robin Francis, who was a student of Bill Mollison. 1993, I did an advanced permaculture course, which taught us how to relate, learn, share with Indigenous people, or third world people, as it was called in those days. So, yeah, the whole thing is that, back then we knew that these times were coming where food insecurity and climate change was really affecting everybody, not just people in poorer countries that have, high populations, less resources, both natural and, labor-wise and all that sort of thing. But so the key focus for me is working with people in the global south and developing a network of trainers, regional hub affiliates, allied organisations, field advisors, members that, really we've got partners in Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, worked in Senegal as well, Cameroon now, Zambia. I'm actually meeting a lot of people through Facebook who are approaching me to partner with them and build education centres. That's what we really need. We need education centres where we can develop a permaculture demonstration farm. We need funding. This is what I'm aiming to achieve this year, is build funds so that we can, get projects happening. So I've funded a few projects myself in Kenya, basically just getting people trained up so that they can train people on the ground, because I'm not in a position to travel much at the moment, especially with COVID and another few reasons there. But so having this technology now, using Zoom and recording the audio visuals, using PowerPoint presentations, and having a wealth of knowledge on the ground there, syntropic agroforestry trainers that have been trained by world-renowned syntropic agroforestry trainer and practitioner, Roland van Reenen. We have some really good teachers on the ground now, and I'm really just supporting them. I'm learning as much from them as they're learning from me. So, we also need to teach basic skills in web development, basic IT. We need to offer good internet access for people, because really all the information's on the net now. We're just researching and developing new ideas. And some people are coming up with their own concepts, and that's beautiful everywhere. From Hawaii, I've traveled all over the world. I've been a woofer, a willing worker on organic farms, so I've traveled everywhere except for South America and Antarctica. But I've been to every continent, and I've seen a lot of good work and learnt a lot of great things. So, but yeah, we need energy, of course. So we're focused on renewables, and I've started a solar business in Ghana, West Africa, hoping to develop that in future as well. So it's all about partnering and building community gardens, which is something I do here in Australia, and work within schools because it starts with the children, really. And I've noticed that there are a lot of wonderful projects in America, in the United States, um, in Detroit. I've seen some wonderful community garden projects and incredible amount of support and healing, actually. I should say that this is a healing modality for people. Growing food, eating nourishing food, cooking together, sharing. Well, the ethics of permaculture are earth care, people care, and share the surplus. And then we have all the principles that we follow. But yeah, it's really just a way of building harmonious and healthy communities. So it it actually draws from indigenous cultures. We're not inventing anything here. We're just drawing from our indigenous knowledge from all around the world, and including Europe, where growing food and nourishing the community with food as medicine as well was very very normal, very common. But now, of course, people are turning more towards um, pharmaceutical products on GMOs and that sort of thing. But I think that's changing again. Um, so yeah, um, I think that's about all I wanted to really share. There's a whole lot I could talk about, but they're the main things. So I'm hoping to partner with people that can direct us in the direction where we can work with people that are willing to fund our projects, and we're building up a network of trainers, and looking for land to develop and communities to work with. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that was wonderful, Rosanna. I think you hit the one common thread that every single one of our presenters has, which is nourishing,
Mhm.
nourishing our public, nourishing our people, and nourishing the land. Uh, Fabulous. If you could put your contact information in private chat, we have people who would really like to contact you about this. So
Fantastic.
fabulous. All right. So moving forward to our next presenter, he is Professor Carlos Richard Santo. Oh, Sanko. My bad. He's our representative from Unidad Africa and Diaspora. Richard, are you available? Carlos?
I cannot see any new window with that name.
So Carlos Sanko has not arrived. Okay. Yeah, he was asking about what the start time was, and I did let him know. I know he'd love to be here. Well, let's go ahead and move forward to Mr. Emil Jansen. Um, Emil Jansen has a very long list of ample qualifications. He is one of the founders of the hip hop movement in South Africa. He has a great deal of connection across borders with other hip hop organizations. Um, he's done a great deal of writing. So I think that the rest he'll be able to let us know himself. So if you're ready, Emil, feel free to step forward.
I don't see him either.
You don't see him either. Oh
No.
my goodness. Okay. Well, I guess that leaves just me, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mr. A, Mr. Carlos Richardson Coe is a representative of a vast network called UnityNet Africa. And UnityNet Africa encompasses a great portion of the continent. Um, and they're looking for connections and partners and memorandums of understanding with permaculture groups, agroforestry groups, and groups that deal in biochar production. They have spoken with us here at Dance and Fitness Concepts about including cultural instruction in order to unify people of different cultures who'd be working in the same area. I'm sorry that he's not here to speak for himself because I do understand that what he'd have to say would be incredibly illuminating as to their extent. Currently, they're trying to move from Africa diaspora and expand into a global network, hitting first all the southern continents and then moving further northward as we get more community partners involved. UnityNet Africa and Diaspora, you can easily Google that and find them in order to contact their offices. And as for Emil, he did speak at our last presentation, Dance Africa and Hip Hop Cultural Preservation #1. So you can get an idea as to who he is and what his role is, because it's multidimensional. So where we are right now, I've got another 15 minutes to fill. So if anyone has questions regarding our intent, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Lisa, do you have any projects that are on the ground in the United States at the moment, within like the communities in, let's say, the Bronx, or you know, where your focus is with, you know, people that are maybe a little bit disadvantaged, or disadvantaged, really disadvantaged?
Certainly, HIP Congress and of course its president Rahman Jamal represent one of 3 different national organizations that have entered into community partnership with the Y of the USA for the Young Dancer Project. And they are starting this month to teach in after-school programs. At the end of that period, there is a goal to unify with the rest of the hip hop community during our Juneteenth festival. We're still working on a location. We've been asking back and forth about Kezar Stadium, which has a history as one of the first large sports stadiums in the United States. The Juneteenth festival, of course, is the celebration of the freeing of African slaves after the Civil War. Of course, I'd like to say a few words about that, but I think I'll leave that for a different day. After-school programs serve about 50 million youth across the country that live in both inner city and rural sections of the United States. And it helps them maintain, #1, a sense of safety between the hours of 3 and 6, where most of them would normally be going home from school, but instead there's no parent or guardian available at that time because they're working. Many of these come from households where there's a guardian but not a parent, or they're living with a relative, or they have 2-3 generations in one home. Makes access to higher education difficult. So after school programs does 3 things. Number 1, physical fitness, which is where the dance comes in. Number 2, homework assistance, so that those who may have a different language base or have more difficulty grasping what happens in a large class situation can get assistance. And then, of course, they also get fed, as many are food anxious, which happens quite a bit in inner city situations. There are 2 other entry programs for community partners in the Young Dancer Project. And these are all programs that are primarily funded through the federal government. Some, approximately 60%, comes from after-school funds. The rest come from the community and what each organization raises, making them true partners in the community. These other 2 programs are an arts program where scholarship is offered to deserving youth to work with a group in the manner of the profession of the dance. And at the end of that period, they perform in a major performance hall.
Wow.
The third is the sport program. And the sport program or sport club generally is taught at a prep school or a learning academy that has made contract with the Board of Education to do seminars in the inner city schools. This works with youth ages 4 to 17, teaches them all the sporting skills and techniques, and does it in a very healthy atmosphere, assisted by researchers and interns from local universities and hospitals and higher institutes of learning. So that's pretty much where we're at right now. We've had a number of studios, small businesses enter the arts program. The sport program itself, we still have to get someone there willing to start that test, because that's the largest program of all. The after school program, when we ran the test with it a little over a decade ago, dance formatting fit into the system like fingers in a glove. It worked very well. So moving that forward is just a slight change of structure for the dance groups at large. Thank you so much for answering that question. You enabled me to crow a little bit. 14 years in the making. So,
Awesome.
And of course, the goal is build that program here in the United States before we spread it worldwide. As the United States, as you know, has no offices of culture or heritage. All they have is the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the equivalent of a carrot on a stick. All other funding winds up coming through the public or private sector, which makes for huge difficulties and inequities in the system. And of course, the United States has a long history of inequities and imbalances. Hopefully, we'll right those things. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just 2 more questions I have. Is there enough time to ask a couple of questions?
We've got another 10 minutes.
Great. Talking about funding now, have you ever requested funding or pitched a proposal to high-profile hip hop or hip hop artists, or people that are quite famous and probably have a lot of money? Maybe have you? Because I've got a different strategy now. I figured that like the athletes, let's say the footballers, that make $1 million a game, and these type of people in Kenya, and high profile athletes, if we get their phone numbers and addresses and email it, well, their managers' contacts maybe, we're going to aim to ask for some money, because let's face it, I mean, they've probably got enough to share, and wouldn't mind sharing with the the groups that probably prop them up to where they are now.
Well, and that's very much true. This system of getting into the social service as a community partner is over 140 years old. It began with basketball, which was invented at a YMCA in Toronto, Canada. And basketball has had a number of issues, from point shaving in the 1920s, which led to the creation of the NCAA, to a little bit of trafficking across borders as we started venturing into Europe. And of course, right now, we've got NBA Africa, which has set itself to getting a system started in 8 different countries on the African continent. And we are in contact with them. They don't always answer back. But we have started pinging a few of the major artists that, look, you got your fortune from this community. You made your life from the culture of those who have gone before. Pay a little back. Be a part of this movement, which ultimately the goal is to use dance to unify diverse peoples in ways nothing else can. So I started with Damon John. We'll see what he has to say.
Love that. That's awesome. Can I ask the last question, or does anyone else have questions? Because I don't want to take up all your time. But
no, it's all yours. Go ahead.
Okay. Just another question. I'm interested in knowing more about the First Nations people. Are they involved in a lot of these community gardens? I don't know too much about that, but I would be interested in working with people, let's say in Arizona or around those areas where I believe they live on reservations, and I think there's a serious drug and alcohol problem, as well as gambling, which apparently they make a lot of their money from gambling. So I'm just wondering, it's not my place to suggest that they practice permaculture, but I just wondered, is there any experience that you can share about the Americans, basically?
My actual experience was with that creation of gambling houses on reservations. That was spearheaded by a fellow by the name of Hillenbrand, Raymond Hillenbrand, who formerly was a Fortune 500 company owner, multi-billionaire. He gave it all up and got himself land in the Dakotas, which he named the Three Bison Ranch. That was the location where they filmed the movie Dances with Wolves. I actually worked for his daughter for a period of 2 years in her home. That's how I found about this. And his the precedents he set in terms of legal jurisprudence were taken up by a group based out of Seattle to make it possible for reservations to actually have a source of income, because everything else has constantly been taken away. If they discover oil and gas on their land, the federal government moves in and takes away the rights. And this is what's been consistent. Everything that got started, those rights were taken away. So these groups of indigenous that still exist here in the United States had no method of moving upwards. There are 5 major areas where you see these gambling houses. I won't go into detail, we don't have the time. But there are also cultural preservation organizations. The largest one is in the Pacific Northwest. Tsimshian and Salish tribes, they joined together to create cultural education in British Columbia, which is part of their major area. And they have schools in spotted areas in the Pacific Northwest, which would be the states of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And yes, there's been jurisdiction to pull those things down, especially in Idaho, where there's a long history of repression. and of course, Eastern Washington. You name a state, we could give you a list. But working with the indigenous, yes, that is important on the list. I do have on our advisory list the groups that I advise as to our progress, the heads of several different organizations within the indigenous population. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to start building with them next. And I thank you for asking that, because perhaps we could talk about how we work the outreach in order to bring the indigenous community in more.
Great. Interesting. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for asking. You've posed some fabulous questions. We've got people in the university system who are far more interested in doing a live study of not just the dances and the movement, but the language as that moves forward. Okay, I see that our host, Anait, is wanting to step in. I'm going to turn this over to her and let her wrap it up if she can.
Thank you so much for today's presentations and information that is super, super precious for dancers you have shared with us. Thank you very much for your presence and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, thank you. We look forward to the third presentation. We'll start to discuss that right away.
Yes, yes. Keep in